I'm going to go ahead and hit record, and we are recording now. So welcome everybody. It is March 3rd, 2021, and welcome to our sentence level writing workshop. We are so glad that you could join us. Before we get started, we just want to introduce ourselves to you. As I mentioned before, I am one of your hosts. My name is Caitlin Mills. I am a senior, class of 2021. Would the rest of the committee like to introduce themselves? Go ahead.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah. I'm also a senior. I guess I'm also one of the hosts. I'm super excited to be here.
Hi, friends. My name is Rin. I'm a senior, double majoring in international relations and women's gender and sexuality studies. I suppose I am your third co-host. And I'll turn it over to Jasana.
Hi, I'm Jasana. I'm a junior anthropology major. And I guess that makes me the fourth co-host. I'm really not sure how many co-hosts we can have.
We're all hosts here. Love it.
Hello, Amira Sawyer here, class of 22. I guess I'm also a co-host here. Glad to be here tonight with you all.
Hi, I'm Felicia Jacques. I'm a senior. This is my second year tutoring, and I'm excited for tonight. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, team. Well, for all of our lovely Scotties here, graduate and undergraduate, we are so stoked to have you here if you could not tell. Tonight, we are talking about sentence level writing, as I've said like 3 times since this meeting started. In case you didn't know where you were, you are in the right Zoom meeting if that's what you're here for. Before we get started with content today, we are going to do a quick little warm up, test your skills, see where you are. Don't panic. It's going to be really cool. Ren is going to be your host for this, so I'm passing it on, and I'm going to mute myself so you have the full floor.
Okay, great. Do we want to move forward to there we go. We're going to warm up our brains. So the premise of this exercise is really simple. You don't have to unmute yourself because I know we've all been in classes all day and we don't want to talk anymore, and that's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a sentence up on the screen, and you're going to respond with your Zoom reactions based on like your impression of it. So you'll use kind of like the open mouth, confused, alarmed emoji to show that you like you can tell there's something off, but you wouldn't know exactly how to fix it. You'll use the heart emoji if you know exactly what's up and you know how to make the sentence more clear or more concise. And you use the confetti emoji to show like there's no problem. This is a great sentence. It's all good. This is, like we said, just a warm up, so don't stress too much. If you don't know, feel free to just guess. No big deal. I'm not calling anyone out for this one. So we can go to the first example. So this sentence is, each of the servers carefully balanced her tray. And y'all feel free to throw up the little Zoom reaction that you feel best matches your impression of the sentence.
Some happy music while you warm up.
So for this sentence, because the indefinite pronoun each is actually singular, the singular third person pronoun her would be considered appropriate and okay in this context. But depending on who you're referring to, you might also use the pronoun they, but that really depends on the context and what you would be going for. So the next one. Okay, cool. So some of the marbles spilled out of its bag. Does anybody have like sort of a gut reaction to this one? Okay, Che knows what's up. It's kind of hard to keep track of everybody, but I'm seeing some in the participants list. I'm sorry, I can't see everyone's all at once, but yeah, I'm seeing a lot of hearts, some confused, like alarmed, and yeah, because you can count marbles because they're a countable noun. It can be inferred that the term some would refer to multiple marbles. So if the pronoun it kind of threw you off there, it's because a plural pronoun like they or their would be better suited in this context. We can move to the next one. Neither the professor nor the teaching assistants finished her presentation. What are y'all's thoughts on this one? I think I saw confusion in the Zoom window from somebody. Yeah, we have some like open mouth, not really totally sure. So because in cases like this where you have multiple subjects, you're going to want to defer to whatever is closest to the pronoun. So you have the teaching assistants, because that's plural, it would make more sense for this sentence to utilize there, because her might be referring to the professor. We don't know. It's not really clear in this sentence what's going on. And Amaris is going to talk us through a little bit more these like pronoun antecedent agreements. So we'll get into that more a little bit. For now, we're going to do a couple of warm-ups on commas. You want to move on, Caitlin? Okay, this is a question. Are you watching me weave this bag, Gwen? What are y'all's thoughts? We have a heart. We've got another heart. I feel like when I call them out, everybody's like, oh, okay, that's the one. I know what it is now. I love it. We're working together. It's cool. So in this, because Gwen is the person being addressed, you would set that off with a vocative comma there. Do you want to move to the next one? So for this, we've got a list of items. I went to the store to grab tofu, salt and pepper, sweet potatoes, and kale. This is actually my shopping list. I went grocery shopping yesterday. What are y'all's thoughts on that sentence? We've got a heart. I love seeing hearts because it shows that people know what's going on. We got a confetti. Yeah, so this sentence with sweet potatoes and kale, you would generally separate those with a comma because they're two separate objects in the list. And generally salt and pepper would be considered like one object, which is why they're not separated by a comma. But we'll get into it more. We can do one last comma question. Yes, so with this, during their honeymoon, which was at Niagara Falls, my parents took lots of pictures. What are y'all's initial thoughts on this one? We have a heart, we got another heart, seeing a few hearts. Nice, nice, nice. So yeah, as it seems like a lot of y'all are noticing, the comment about where the honeymoon is not really super essential to the message, which is that they took a lot of pictures, right? So Caitlin and Leah are going to talk a little bit more about how to determine when and how you use commas and when to talk about essential and non-essential information. We've got two more warm-up questions. All right, as soon as I get out of bed, I did some basic stretches. This is actually my quarantine routine. I hate sitting in front of a computer all day. I have to do something when I wake up. What are y'all's thoughts on this sentence? We've got a heart and a couple more hearts. Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, this one is a little bit confusing, right? Because it mixes up the sentences in the middle. We switch from a present tense, I get out of bed, into a past tense, I did some stretches, and that can be really confusing for your reader. Let's do one more warm-up question. We were hiking near the canyon rim when a large rattlesnake slithers across the trail. So what are y'all's thoughts on this one? Okay, I'm seeing a couple of hearts. Great, a couple more. Yeah, this is another one where the verb tense switches up kind of in the middle. It's really confusing. We were hiking is past tense, slithers is present tense. And we all see that as readers, and that clues us in that like something is not quite right if this sentence is not very clear. And Felicia's going to get a little bit more into utilizing consistent verb tense and is going to talk a little bit about that and how to make sure that you're making your writing as clear as you possibly can when you're talking about something that's happened in the past, present, or future tense. But yeah, that's it for the warm-up. Thank you all so much for your participation. I'm sorry I couldn't see absolutely everybody, but I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ren. Before we get into it, everyone, I just want to set this blanket statement before we really kind of get into the nuts and bolts of grammar in this workshop. Grammar seems like a lot of rules, right? Like there are a lot of things to remember. The comma goes here, the comma does not go here. You use this word, you don't use this word. Yes, grammar has rules, and that's how our languages usually work. But grammar is really important just so in like general for communicating really effectively and making sure that our points are being interpreted in the way that we want them interpreted, right? So that's why we're here. And that's why we're talking about grammar in depth today. So the first thing that we are going to cover is pronouns and antecedents with Amaris and Tristana.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, Ren, for that wonderful warm-up exercise. So just as a refresher here before we get into the nitty-gritty, a pronoun can be defined as a word that replaces a noun or a noun phrase, right? We typically use pronouns to enhance the clarity of our sentences and also avoid redundancy. So we have an example here. Sam runs every Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Here in this sentence, we have one noun, which is Sam, and this is a singular noun, which is important to point out. So some appropriate pronouns for Sam would then be she or they. So we can have she runs every Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. and they run every Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Both of those pronouns work in that sentence. Typically, we interpret they as being plural sometimes. However, we know that they can be used as a singular subject. Okay. We can go on to the next. Before I get into this example, I know I mentioned that we can use pronouns to kind of enhance the clarity of our sentences and avoid redundancy. However, anytime there is no reference or a vague reference to the actual noun that the pronoun refers to, it's best to just go ahead and name the noun. And to make that make a little bit more sense, let me go ahead and look at this example. So this may look like two separate things. It's actually part of the same example. However, we split it up to make it easier to understand. So it reads, Kierkegaard describes the rationale for the double movement of faith through the story of Abraham. It is believed that had Kierkegaard been without faith, he would not have become the father of great nations and reaped the promises of God. The sentence that follows that parenthetical is, if it is instead understood that the ethical is the highest form of human existence, one would have to maintain that he was a murderer. So we're going to cut that off right there because the rest of that sentence is not as important for us. So in this body paragraph of a philosophy essay that I actually wrote, I've identified two nouns here, right? Kierkegaard and Abraham. But the sentence that follows our parenthetical, if it is instead understood that the ethical is the highest form of existence, one would have to maintain that he was a murderer. It's a little confusing about what noun he actually refers to in this instance. Is it Kierkegaard or is it Abraham? So because we have two nouns here, it is better to then just go ahead and name the noun that we're actually referring to instead of using a pronoun. So with this in mind, yes, pronouns can be helpful, but they should be used carefully and in close proximity with the actual noun that it refers to, okay? So instead of standing alone, typically the sentence that contains pronouns follows a sentence that clearly identifies the nouns in questions. That sentence containing the pronouns is called an antecedent, hence the fact that a definition of the antecedent is a word, phrase, or clause whose denotation is referred to by a pronoun. So now you're probably wondering, okay, we got pronoun, we got antecedent. What exactly is the relationship between the two, okay? So pronoun antecedent agreement refers to pronouns matching in number, that being singular or plural, person and sometimes gender to the subject. To make that make some more sense, let's look at this example we have. So we have Mike hates mint chocolate ice cream because he thinks it tastes like toothpaste. First of all, I don't know what Mike is doing because I love mint chocolate ice cream. However, for the purposes of this sentence, let's go ahead and zoom in on the highlighted pronouns, he and it. We have those pronouns because we have Mike, who is a person, and we're assuming that he is a man or a boy. So he matches with that noun. And then we have mint chocolate ice cream, which is a singular subject. So then the appropriate pronoun to use would then be it. So in this instance, we have an antecedent. He thinks it tastes like toothpaste. That agrees with our first clause with two nouns, Mike and mint chocolate ice cream, okay? You can keep moving to look at some more examples. So we have some more examples here with our current administration. The first example reads, Joe gave Kamala the microphone because they had to give remarks at the inauguration. Okay, yes, this is a grammatically correct sentence, but there's some interesting things happening here that I'll explain later. The appropriate way to say this would be Joe gave Kamala the microphone because she had to give remarks at the inauguration. And the reason that we should use she instead of they in this sentence is because we only have one noun that is actually doing the action of giving remarks. So to actually get at what we're talking about, we need to zoom in on that singular subject, which is Kamala, and bring that pronoun out in our antecedent. Okay, so yeah, we could say they, but it's only Kamala who's giving the remarks because she has the microphone. Okay. Keep moving. All right, so just as a quick recap, a pronoun is a word that replaces a noun or a noun phrase. An antecedent is a word, phrase, or clause whose denotation is referred to by a pronoun. And then pronoun antecedent agreement refers to pronouns matching in number, that being singular or plural, person, and sometimes gender. And just as a reminder, pronouns can be helpful, but they should always be used in close proximity with the noun that they actually refer to. All right, so now I'll pass it to Jasana, who will walk us through an exercise to check our understanding.
Okay, thank you, Amaris. We're about to put some of your skills to the test, but it's not a real test. I will not judge you, I promise. So if you guys could just open the chat, we're going to move on and start with our first example. Harry Potter and his best friend both love butterbeer and drink it all the time. So if you guys can just identify the subject and pronoun in the chat, that would be awesome. I want to know what you guys think. It's Harry Potter themed because I love Harry Potter. Any Potterheads out there? And it's okay if you're not sure, take a guess. It'll be fine, I promise. Okay, I'm seeing some responses. Cool, cool. Harry Potter subject and friend. Pronoun it, okay. So in this sentence, Harry Potter is the subject. His refers to Harry Potter because he is singular, a person. And then butterbeer is also a singular subject and it refers to butterbeer. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, cool. I got a thumbs up. Check marks. Oh, I like this. Cool.
I have a request to repeat.
Sure. Okay. So Harry Potter is our singular subject. His refers to Harry Potter because it is singular. And then butterbeer is another subject and it refers to butterbeer because butterbeer is also a singular subject. Are we feeling okay about that? Okay. So butterbeer is a subject for it. It refers to it. So when they say his best friend both love butterbeer and they drink it all the time, it will be referring to the butterbeer. His best friend is not a subject in this sentence. It's just Harry. And then the pronoun his is used to refer to Harry.
I think more precisely for the question about butterbeer, butterbeer is the antecedent for the pronoun it, right? In the overall sentence, it's functioning like as the object, right? Harry Potter and his best friend love what? They love butterbeer, but it's serving as the subject or the antecedent for the pronoun it. A lot of grammatical terms being thrown around here, but that's the gist of it. We have two more examples to try this out with.
Okay, let's try. Ron and Harry missed their train to Hogwarts. Can we try identifying the subjects and pronouns in the chat? Okay, I got a response. Perfect. Ron and Harry are the subjects, and then there refers to Ron and Harry because they're together. There are two of them. It's plural. It looks like this. I think that makes sense for everyone, but please let me know if it doesn't. And if not, we can move on. Professor McGonagall prefers her students to be on time to class. What are people's responses to this? So in the sentence, Professor McGonagall is our subject and her refers to Professor McGonagall. And that's it for now. So I'm gonna send it off to Lee and Caitlin to talk about commas.
Thank you so much, Dasana. We hope that all of your questions were answered, but let me take a quick beat here. Does anybody have any questions in relation to the exercises that Dasana went over? I think we might have answered all of them, but just drop your question again in the chat. Okay. Just scrolling, give it a few. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dasana, for those examples. So actually, Caitlin is going to start off this part of the workshop, but we are going to dive into some commas. I think Caitlin and I are just a little excited about commas, but it's okay. Okay, go ahead, Caitlin.
Yes, there are multiple types of commas, right? We can talk about so many commas, but we're only going to talk about 3 of them today. The first comma that we're going to talk about is one that we call the vocative comma. Vocative comes from like a part of speech that we use when we're like diagramming sentences, which is arguably not very a fun exercise if you're not into grammar, but vocative commas are used when the speaker is addressing a specific person or a group of people. So when we are directly addressing that individual, the person's name is offset by commas. So if you can recall our warm-up exercise, are you watching me weave this basket, Gwen? The comma that was missing there was a vocative comma. So in short, if you want to address someone, put a comma right before you state their name.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the function of a vocative comma. Essentially, vocative comma works to alert us as readers to the addressee of a sentence. So they make us as readers aware of who is speaking and who is talking, or at least who we're talking to. So if this is still a little bit unclear, let me show you a few examples. So on the screen, you'll see 2 of them. Well, listen, Caitlin, it sure is good to see you too. Or, Amaris, could you pass me the salt? In the first example, I addressed Caitlin and told her how nice it was to see her. And in the second example, I addressed Amaris and asked her if she could pass me the salt. And because Caitlin and Amaris were my sentence's addressees because I was asking them to do something or because my sentence was directed towards them, both of their names were offset by vocative commas, as you can see there on the screen. So let's talk a little bit about when do we use a vocative comma and also a little bit about the why. So as you can see from the 2 examples previously, vocative commas can be used at the beginning or in the middle of sentences. Well, listen, Caitlin was in the middle versus Amaris, could you pass me the salt, was in the beginning. However, they can also be used at the end of sentences, and I wanted to take some time to say that just because I know me, past Leah, would see like an example, and then I would go and do my own work, and then it wouldn't show exactly how the example was, and then I would get confused. So just letting you know that it can also happen at the end of the sentence. So it sure is good to see you too, Caitlin. Or could you pass me the salt, Amaris? Here, Caitlin and Amaris are still my sentence addressees like before, but their names are now offset by commas at the end of the sentences. And in your own work, you can also play around with where you put your addressee's name and the corresponding vocative commas in your sentences. Either way, just make sure that they are there and that your addressee's names are offset by commas. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Caitlin to talk a little bit more about another type of comma.
Hello, friends. The next type of comma we are going to talk about this evening is the listing comma, also known as the serial comma. Listing commas are used to separate items in a series, like the warm-up example that we had before, where Ren was, telling us about what they got at the grocery store. There were a lot of different items that they got. And so each of those items were separated by a listing comma. The final two items in the list are usually separated by an and or an or, depending on what your sentence is about. And it should always be preceded by, well, not always, but it's usually preceded by a comma. The last comma in this series of commas is commonly known as the Oxford comma. Now, the Oxford comma has a variety of uses, but most commonly we see it used as a listing comma. And we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. Now, often we're kind of taught that commas are used to help us add places to breathe in sentences. It really helps us to find places, especially when we're reading out loud, that we can kind of take a pause. But in fact, they also are used to help us more accurately organize blocks of thought or logical groupings. And so let's take another look at a listing example here. I went to the post office, grocery store, gas station, and the dress shop today. Between each of these, we have a comma, right? Because the listing comma is going to indicate to the reader that each of these items are grammatically separate from each other. So even though in the sentence we have all of the places that I did errands and they all are related in some way, we know that because there is a comma, these items are separated from each other and they're not necessarily related. Okay, so in the second sentence, we have I bought strawberries and mangoes, bath towels and kitchen towels, as well as hand sanitizer while I was at the supermarket today. So we have commas that are separating some of the items, but not all of the items, right? Well, at a supermarket, like if you go to Walmart or Target or something, like you can buy certain items in certain sections together. Well, that's how these items are grouped. And we know that because of the way the listing commas are placed in that sentence. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the Oxford comma. We tend to use the Oxford comma because it releases ambiguity, distinguishing the last few items in a series. But the presence or the absence of an Oxford comma can kind of lead to a different interpretation of the meaning. So let's just kind of look at an example to see exactly what it is that I'm talking about. The most influential texts for Kyla's research were written by her mentors, comma, Toni Morrison and Alice Walker. Now, in this first example, Toni Morrison and Alice Walker, because of where the comma is placed, it looks like they are her mentors, right? It looks like we're defining who Kyla's mentors for her research are. Let's look at the second sentence. The most influential texts for Kyla's research were written by her mentors, Toni Morrison and Alice Walker. Because we added in that Oxford comma, we see that Toni Morrison and Alice Walker are individual authors who also wrote texts that were used in Kyla's research. Okay, so we have three influential authors for Kyla's research there with the use of the Oxford comma. So use the Oxford comma at your discretion. If you're listing something that's kind of arbitrary, like a grocery list or just a list of whatever, courses, classes, I don't know, whatever you're writing, make sure that when you employ the Oxford comma, you're doing it because you're distinguishing the last few items in a series. When you don't do that, it can lead to a different interpretation in meaning. Okay, so I'm going to toss it to Leah really fast. That was a lot of information. She's going to kind of talk a little bit more about the function of the listing comma in a sentence.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. All right, so as Caitlin said, listing commas are used to separate items in a list within your sentence. So quite frankly, its function is to help us pause, decipher through a list of items in a sentence, and then in general, understand the sentence overall meaning. But let's go ahead and take a look at an example that stresses the importance of listing commas. I found this example online while I was doing some research for the workshop and thought it would be a great way to illustrate the importance of listing commas. You may choose your favorite activity while at camp, including hiking and boating, morning calisthenics, crafts and woodwork, sharing scary stories of ghosts and yoga. And here, without the comma at the end, after sharing scary stories of ghosts, to indicate that yoga is kind of a little bit of a separate activity, this sentence reads as though students will also have an opportunity to share scary stories of yoga. So to prevent this misunderstanding, it is important that we include a listing comma after each item and also before the last item. And then here at the bottom, you'll see a little bit of a visual of that revised sentence. You may choose your favorite activity while at camp, including hiking and boating, morning calisthenics, crafts and woodwork, sharing scary stories of ghosts, and yoga. So now we see sharing scaries of ghosts and yoga are different. I mean, you could share your scary stories of yoga, but I don't think that was the intention of the sentence. So I don't think you should do that. And so by adding a listing comma, the writer's original sentence remains intact. And in this case, you won't be forced to, of course, share those scary stories of ghosts and yoga. And then really briefly, our last type of comma tonight is going to be the appositive comma, which Caitlin will tell you a little bit more about.
Yes. So in order to understand the purpose of an appositive comma, we first need to understand what an appositive is. So an appositive is a non-essential clause that provides extra information about the subject of a sentence. They are not critical to understanding the sentence itself. Okay, that's the most important part. If you can take an appositive out of the sentence, you should still be able to get the meaning of the sentence. Okay, and so these clauses are going to be offset by commas, which we are calling appositive commas today. Leah, function?
Appositive commas, they provide us, while reading, further meaning and explanation to the subject noun at hand in a sentence. So it is no way essential or required to include an appositive and its corresponding commas in our sentences, but it is nice to offer them to your readers, especially if it relates to the rest of your sentence. So here's an example. My father, who plays the trombone, is a professor of music at the University of the Virgin Islands. Here, we don't really need to know that he plays the trombone, but it is a nice piece of information to offer my readers, and it does relate to the rest of the sentence. So keep this in mind as you build your own sentences. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Caitlin one last time to talk a little bit about when we use an appositive comma and why. I love this back and forth. I love it.
Yeah, this is a good time. Sorry all about the slides. My computer's just doing some weird things. But when we use appositive commas, just really quickly, again, appositives are non-essential clauses to a sentence. So if a sentence would be clear and complete and without the appositive, then commas are necessary. You want to put it there because that shows us that I don't really need to read this in order to understand the sentence. However, in some cases, the noun or the subject is a little too vague without the appositive, so that information is going to be essential to understanding the sentence. And in those cases, you do not want to put commas. So if it is not essential, we add commas. If it is essential, we do not add commas. Let me give you an example. So Joseph Kennedy, the young naval reservist, was an entirely different person than Joseph Kennedy, the former US ambassador to the United Kingdom. All right, so the clauses that describe Joseph Kennedy and then Joseph Kennedy are essential to understanding who each Joseph Kennedy is, right? Because if we just left it, we wouldn't really know. If we took those descriptors out, we couldn't tell that these are really two different people, right? So in this case, we do not put any appositive commas because the clauses that describe Joseph Kennedy in both parts of the sentence are essential to understanding the meaning of the first sentence, okay? Let's look at the second sentence. Joseph Kennedy Jr., the young naval reservist, was an entirely different person than Joseph P. Kennedy Sr., the former US ambassador to the United Kingdom. All right, so because the subjects, Joseph Kennedy Jr. and Joseph Kennedy Sr. have descriptors to their names that demonstrate that they are two different people and also indicates that they have some sort of father-son relationship, right? That makes those two subjects distinct from each other. So knowing that the young naval reservist is Joseph Kennedy Jr. isn't exactly essential to understanding the sentence, because with those two, with adding the junior and the senior to their names, we know that they are entirely different people from each other, which is essentially the meaning of the sentence. Alrighty, we're gonna hand it off real quick to Drasana to do some quick review and see how much you got, okay? Drasana?
Okay, thank you. So we're going to do some really quick review. It's going to be with the Zoom reaction, so super fun, super easy. We can go to the first one. The first one is, can you help me fold the laundry, Hermione? So is this a vocative comma, listing comma, or positive comma? Just drop your reactions, see what you guys think. Cool, seeing lots of thumbs up. Awesome, yes, that's correct. It is a vocative comma. So we can move on. Please pick up apples and oranges, peanut butter, bread, ham and turkey, and iced tea when you go to the store. What kind of comma do you guys think this is? Awesome, yes, it is a listing comma. I know that one was hard. We can move on. Hermione Granger, a student at Hogwarts School for Wizarding, is fantastic with spells. Take a guess, let me know. So this is an appositive comma. Do we have any questions about why this is an appositive comma? No.
Awesome.
I think we can move on.
Cool. If you do have any questions while we're going through the sections, I just want to say this really fast. Go ahead and write them down. We will have time for like a full-blown like question and answer session at the end, but there's a lot of content we want to get through. So, okay. Alrighty, up next, we have verb tenses with Felicia and Gisana.
Hi. So verb tenses. Every sentence includes a verb. This verbs, of course, are words that express an action or a state of being. So it goes along with subject and verb within your sentence. For verb tenses, we're connecting the sentence to a period of time, and that period of time is going to be seen in the past, present, or the future. So typically in our writing, when we refer to things in the past, we might say something like the writer indicated. In the present, it's the writer indicates. In future, the writer will indicate. So this kind of just shows how we see it in our own writing. So for past tense verbs, the past tense is utilized to refer to scenarios or events that have already happened. The example I have here is Octavia Butler's Kindred is modeled on a variety of memoirs gathered in the 1930s slave narrative project. When looking at the past tense, something to keep in mind is when you're referring to the past, a lot of text and different things, it happened in a historical context possibly, so that's why it needs to be referred to always in the past. Next example would be Alice Walker's parents were sharecroppers in Eatonton, Georgia. She participated in the civil rights movement and published novels, short stories, poetry, essays, and children's books. This example is to show how the past tense is used when using it as a description for the author. We're given more information in the background of the author rather than looking at a specific text. Present tense. So the present tense is utilized to refer to scenarios or events that are happening right now. We are in the moment. So chapter 4 and 5 of the History of Black Business in America by Julia Walker reveals the ordeals that enslaved and free Black people contend with as participants in business. So looking at reveal and contend to show that this is happening right now. And this is happening right now because you are reviewing this book in context right now for the author in the paper. Okay. So for this part, I'm going to pass the mic to Caitlin.
Hello, friends. So verb tenses seem very simple, right? We'll talk about why we're talking about verb tenses so simplistically in just a moment. But I would like to introduce you to another type of verb tense that we often use in narrative writing, and that is the historical present tense. This tense uses present tense verbs to describe events in the past. I personally really like this tense. I learned about it when I took Latin as a first year student. I was like, what? This is so cool. But we often use this tense when we talk casually with each other about what's happening in our days, right? Like we'll say, oh, I went to class and so says, this, that, and the other. And then the professor says, so we like to react to that, where we like to replay that event as if it's happening right now. And that's what we can do in our papers as a rhetorical device. It adds a sense of immediacy and drama, and it draws the reader directly and insistently into the actions of the past. And it makes us feel like we're right there. So it's a really cool tool that you can use. Let's look at an example just so you have a visual idea of what it is that I'm talking about. This is from a book by Peter Rodman called Presidential Command. And the quote here says, there's a famous story of President Abraham Lincoln taking a vote at a cabinet meeting on whether to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. All his cabinet secretaries vote nay, whereupon Lincoln raises his right hand and declares, the ayes have it. So clearly the Emancipation Proclamation was like in the 1860s, right? This is not something that's happening in the present tense. But what happens in this particular quote is Peter Rodman is bringing us into that moment, saying that they're taking a vote, right? They're voting this, they're voting that, and this was the outcome. It's a really, really, really effective tool to use in your writing. Some other places that we see the historical present tense is in headlines, right? The Super Bowl post, the worst reviewer ratings since 2007. New Jersey firefighters rescue a deer that got stuck in the fence, right? Like these are some of the places that we see the historical present tense. But the important thing to remember about using this verb tense in particular is that it should be employed when you are using a narrative style of writing. You don't necessarily have to be writing a story to use this tense, but you want to make sure that it's consistent throughout the entirety of that essay, because it's really easy to slip in and out of, oh, I'm doing the past tense, I'm doing the present tense when you're trying to tell a story or whatever. But you want to use this historical present tense as a rhetorical device with the purpose of creating that sense of urgency and painting a mental picture. If your goal is not to do that when you're writing your paper, then this is not the tense you want to use. You would want to stick with your third person past tense. Okay? Back to you, Felicia.
Thank you. Full disclosure, that was the first time I really heard about the historical present tense like that. So this was really helpful to hear. So going next to future tense verbs. The future tense verb is used to make a prediction or express an action that has not taken place yet. So you see this a lot in STEM possibly. So for this example, future experiments will look for motor activity and homologous muscles of the pregnatal abdominal segments of both sexes. Sorry for those mispronunciations, but the idea is that we're looking for motor activity. This will be happening in the near future. So we've been talking about what all these pretenses are, verb tenses are, and how we see them. But now it's time to talk about why we really need to use them properly. Oh, sorry. So for just using them for the present tense in general, it's to have consistency in our papers. It's to have a strong argument that we want to deliver. So that means when you are writing your paper, typically when you have one verb tense, you use that verb tense throughout the assignment. And that shows just consistency and that you're following through what your writing pattern is. So thank you. And now to Jasana.
Okay, so we're going to do one last review with me. So quickly open the chat and we can move on to that first example. Yesterday morning, I went, or will go to Diagon Alley and bought, or will buy a new wand. So if you guys could just let me know what you think the correct answer is. Went and bought, I'm seeing. Anything else? Anyone has any ideas? Are we sticking with went and bought? Okay, yes, that's correct. It's went and bought. It's in the past tense. It happened yesterday. Tomorrow I will go to the leaky cauldron with my sister. Thoughts and ideas? Yes, will go, future tense. Awesome. I am, was, will be happy today. Yes, I am happy. I love that. I hope we're all happy. And that is correct. It is happening currently now, present tense.
Alrighty, hello friends. I know that that was a lot of content. We went through it at lightning speed. And we had a lot of examples to kind of follow through and talk through. The most important thing that I really would like everyone to take away is that even though we had a lot of simplistic examples, we have an understanding of like why we do the things that we do, right? We use the commas because we're trying to communicate separate items in a list or separate ideas, right? Or that this information is not very essential. It adds a lot of nuance into the papers and the speeches that we're writing, right? So there is a grander purpose to grammar than just a bunch of rules and regulations. And so hopefully by having a lot of examples, you can kind of see where these things show up, and then you can apply them in your own writing. Now is the time, if you have questions about the topics that we've covered today, we would love to talk through them with you in this cute little question answer session. And if you don't have any questions, we totally have more examples because grammar is in fact everywhere. So feel free to use the chat. Go ahead. What's up, Melody?
So for the past example where it's like it was saying I am happy today, can't you also say I will be happy today if it was like manifested in the form of just like a thought in the morning that you want, or like a future tense, in a sense, like a wishful future tense? Like, can't you manipulate that in the context that you're using?
Yes,
It's
you
kind of like
can.
subjective a little bit, so that's why it gets
Correct.
confusing.
Yes, yes. Depending on the context of where that sentence is placed, you could use I will be happy today. Or if it was the end of the day and you're talking to your friends, like, wow, I was actually pretty happy today. It just depends on the context, for sure.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for asking that. Any other questions?
It looks like we have a question in the chat asking where can we find extra writing tutoring, and I'm going to actually copy in the link to the Agnes Scott CWS website, where you can go to make an account and register an account and then make an appointment with a tutor pretty much anytime. We're staffed Monday through or Sunday through Friday from like 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we can help at any stage in the writing process, from brainstorming to just final revisions or incorporating feedback. So, yeah.
And grammar too, clearly. This is one of the fun things that we get to do as well. Any more questions? Pronouns, antecedents, commas, tenses, verb tenses.
We do have a question about commas by, I believe it's Nani. Can you use an example of using commas in compound and complex sentences?
Indeed. Okay, y'all gonna have to, my Zoom training only goes so far. Okay. Does anyone else have an example that they can do while I try to pull up one really fast? Because what I can do is pull up like one of my old papers and try to find something.
I think one example of commas in compound or complex sentences would be some of the listing examples that Caitlin and Leah used, where you have multiple items in a list that you might have multiple things that function as a single item, like salt and pepper, or I think one example is like shower curtains and bath towels that you're grouping together. And so those sorts of complex lists, you might have lists with punctuation within them. or rather an item that has a punctuation within it. And then you might have to use semicolons as well as commas to differentiate your different items in your list. That's the first example I think of. Amaris, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I actually typed up something I'm going to drop in the chat. So.
Right. I have another example from one of the papers that I have written that I can also put in the chat as well. Send to everyone. So this example is from a historiography that I wrote for my senior sim. And there's a lot of things that are happening in this sentence. So I will just kind of take a moment to read it and explain. So we have he, which is referring to James Anderson, one of the authors that informed my research. Anderson credits the formalization of public education to Black Native Southerners, comma. This is going to be in a appositive comma. It's just providing a definition. If you think about the term Black Native Southerner, you could kind of derive this definition. But Black Native Southerners, comma, ex-slaves who were intent on restructuring their lives through obtaining an education, comma, and argues that the existence of Black education within the repressive Southern economic system made its structure, comma, ideology, comma, and content fundamentally different from those of other Americans. So we have two kinds of commas that work in that sentence, right? We have an appositive comma, giving a definition to the term Black Native Southerners. And then we have that listing comma that Ren was just talking about in terms of what made it the Southern socioeconomic system, its structure, ideology, and content fundamentally different from other Americans. So I hope that was helpful. Okay. Yeah, complex. I love to write like super in-depth complex sentences. So I think about commas a lot. I'm really glad that you asked that question as well. Awesome. Any other questions? I can't see the chat, so y'all may have to keep calling them out as they come in.
Do I need to explain my example? I dropped it, so I will explain it. So it's similar to what Caitlin has here, just shorter. But we have Jeffrey Prager, a professor at UCLA, has degrees in physics, biology, and chemistry. So this information about Jeffrey being a professor at UCLA, that's set off by appositive commas because that's not essential to the sentence necessarily. The sentence still makes sense and has meaning without the appositive. And then after that, we have listing commas between physics, biology, and chemistry because he has multiple degrees. So that is why we used a listing comma.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Amaris. Okay.
All right, I know you went through this before, but can you just repeat what a positive comma is again?
Yes. An appositive comma are the commas that offset non-essential clauses in a sentence. So if you have a subject and you're giving another clause that's describing that subject or just giving more information about that subject, and it's not critical to us understanding our overall meaning of the sentence, we identify that as an appositive and we frame it with two commas on either side.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Now, if that information is essential to understanding the phrase, we do not use those commas. We put them in our pocket and we save them for when we need them for another time. Can y'all tell that I'm an education person? I'm sorry. Put them in our pocket, yeah. Awesome. Well, in our last few minutes here, we don't have any questions. I just want to remind everyone that, again, the Center for Writing and Speaking is here to support you in every stage of the writing process. If you are not quite sure what the professor is asking for in an assignment, book an appointment. We're here for that. We can talk through some of those options with you. If you want to brainstorm, if you just want to go through grammar, if you want to understand some more in depth of what we talked about in this presentation, you can make an appointment for that. If you have a big project and you need us to go through your draft, like, we're also here for those kinds of things too. So we're here to support you at every stage of the writing process. We want to thank everyone so much for coming out to our workshop tonight. We hope that you found it super helpful. And in the interest of being respectful of everyone's time, it is 7:29, so we're going to go ahead and end the workshop here. But feel free to book appointments with any of us. I am one of your hosts, Caitlin Mills. The rest of my committee, Felicia, Gersana, Ren, Amaris, and Leah, are super excited to have hosted you tonight. Thank you all so much for coming, and we hope you all have a good one. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.